The morning sun rose over Nova Haven, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. Sarah Chen stood at the window of her small home, watching her children play in the garden below. The colony had been her family's home for 3 generations now, ever since her grandmother had been among the first settlers to arrive on this distant world. Nova Haven was a peaceful place. The humans who lived there had built a simple life far from Earth. They farmed the rich soil, raised their children, and looked up at the stars with wonder. The colony had grown slowly over the years, spreading across the gentle hills and valleys of this world they had come to love. Sarah smiled as her daughter Emma chased her younger brother across the grass. These quiet moments were precious to her. Life on Nova Haven was not always easy, but it was good. The colonists worked hard, helped each other, and dreamed of the future. None of them knew that their peaceful lives were about to change forever. In the cold darkness of space, far beyond the orbit of Nova Haven's twin moons, a massive fleet moved silently through the void. The ships were sleek and dark, built for war rather than exploration. They belonged to the Corvath Empire, a vast civilization that had spread across hundreds of star systems. Admiral Vexnar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and eyes that glowed with a cold yellow light. His uniform was decorated with medals from dozens of campaigns. He had conquered many worlds in his long career, and he saw no reason why this one should be any different. "Status report," he commanded. "We are approaching the human colony, Admiral," replied his tactical officer. "They have no military presence, no defense fleet, no orbital weapons platforms. Their technology is primitive compared to ours." Vexnar allowed himself a small smile. "Excellent. These humans will make good slaves. Their planet is rich in resources that the Empire needs." The Corvath had been watching humanity for some time. They had seen the humans spread out from their homeworld, establishing colonies on distant planets. The Corvath Empire had conquered hundreds of species, and they saw no reason to treat humans any differently. To them, humans were just another weak race waiting to be added to their collection. "Admiral," said the communications officer, "we have intercepted transmissions from the colony. They call this world Nova Haven. Population is approximately 50,000. 50,000 new workers for our mines," Vexnar said. "Begin the attack. Show them no mercy. They must learn immediately that resistance is pointless." The fleet moved into position. 100 warships, each one capable of leveling a city, arranged themselves in a perfect formation above the peaceful colony below. On the surface, Sarah was preparing lunch when the first alarm sounded. It was a sound she had never heard before, a deep wailing that seemed to come from everywhere at once. She ran outside and looked up at the sky. What she saw made her blood run cold. Dark shapes were descending from the heavens. Dozens of them, hundreds. They blocked out the sun as they fell, casting shadows across the land. "Mama!" Emma screamed, running toward her mother. Sarah grabbed both her children and held them tight. All around her, people were running, screaming, trying to find shelter. But there was nowhere to hide. The Corvath ships opened fire. Beams of brilliant energy struck the ground, vaporizing buildings and roads and people. The central marketplace, where Sarah had bought vegetables just yesterday, disappeared in a flash of light. The school where her children learned, the hospital where they had been born, the town hall where the colonists gathered to make decisions together, all of it was destroyed in moments. Sarah ran. She did not think about where she was going. She just held her children and ran as fast as her legs would carry her. Behind her, the world she knew was ending. The attack lasted for hours. When it was finally over, Nova Haven was in ruins. More than half the colonists were dead. The survivors huddled in basements and caves, terrified and confused. They had no weapons. They had no way to fight back. They were just farmers and teachers and doctors, ordinary people who had never wanted to hurt anyone. The Corvath ground forces landed soon after. Armored soldiers marched through the destroyed streets, rounding up the survivors. Those who resisted were shot. Those who surrendered were put in chains. Sarah and her children were captured along with hundreds of others. They were forced to march to a collection point near what had once been the spaceport. Corvath soldiers stood guard, their weapons ready, their faces showing no emotion. Admiral Vexnar landed to inspect his victory. He walked among the prisoners, looking at them with cold contempt. These humans were weak, he thought. They had not even tried to fight. They would make obedient slaves. "You belong to the Corvath Empire now," he announced, his voice amplified so all could hear. "Your old lives are over. You will work for us until the day you die. Resist and you will be destroyed. Obey and you may live." Sarah held her children close, her heart filled with fear and rage. But she said nothing. She could not afford to draw attention to herself. She had to protect Emma and her son. That was all that mattered now. But somewhere in her heart, a small flame of hope refused to die. She knew that Nova Haven had sent an emergency message the moment the attack began. The message was traveling through space right now, racing toward distant stars at faster than light speed. Earth would know what had happened here, and Earth would respond. The Corvath had made a terrible mistake. They had studied human technology and found it lacking. They had counted human ships and found them few. They had measured human weapons and found them weak. But they had not studied human history. They did not know what happened when someone attacked human civilians. They did not understand that the peaceful farmers and teachers of Nova Haven were the children of warriors, descendants of a species that had fought its way up from the mud of a dangerous world to claim the stars. They did not know that humanity had a rule, an unwritten law that every human understood deep in their bones. You do not attack our colonies. You do not hurt our people. And if you do, there will be consequences. The message from Nova Haven reached Earth 3 days later. It carried images and recordings, evidence of the massacre and the enslaving of the survivors. It was broadcast on every channel, shown on every screen, played in every home. And humanity's response was immediate and absolute. In the great cities of Earth, people took to the streets, not to protest, but to volunteer. Military recruitment centers were overwhelmed. Factories that had been making consumer goods retooled themselves overnight to produce weapons and ships. Scientists abandoned their research to work on war technology. The United Earth government called an emergency session. Representatives from every nation on the planet gathered in the Great Assembly Hall. For the first time in centuries, there was no argument, no debate, no political maneuvering. President Maya Rodriguez stood before the assembly. She was a small woman with iron-gray hair and eyes that burned with controlled fury. "The Corvath Empire has attacked our people," she said. "They have murdered innocent civilians. They have enslaved our citizens. They think we are weak. They think we will not fight back. They are wrong." The assembly hall erupted in applause. "We did not seek this war," Rodriguez continued. "We came to the stars in peace. We wanted only to explore, to learn, to build new homes among the distant suns. But we will not allow this crime to go unanswered. The Corvath will learn what happens when you attack an Earth colony." That night the orders went out. The sleeping giant of human military power began to wake. On Nova Haven, Sarah and the other survivors were being loaded onto transport ships. They would be taken to Corvath space to work in the mines and factories of the Empire until they died. As Sarah looked back at her burning world one last time, she whispered a prayer. "Please," she said, "please come for us." She did not know if anyone could hear her. She did not know if help would ever come, but she refused to give up hope. Somewhere out there, among the countless stars, humanity was rising. Admiral James Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, flagship of the United Earth Navy. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and a face that showed the weight of many years of service. His uniform was simple compared to what the politicians wore, but the medals on his chest told the story of a lifetime spent defending humanity. Around him, officers worked at their stations, preparing the fleet for departure. The Defiance was the largest battleship ever built by human hands, but it was just one ship among many. Through the viewports, Morrison could see hundreds of other vessels taking up formation. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, carriers, and dozens of support ships, all of them ready for war. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. "Admiral," said Captain Chen, his executive officer, "all ships report ready for departure. The fleet is at your command." Morrison nodded slowly. He had spent his entire career hoping he would never have to use this fleet for its intended purpose. Now that the moment had come, he felt the weight of it pressing down on him like a physical force. "What's our total strength?" he asked. 412 combat vessels, Admiral, 200,000 personnel, plus the supply and support ships." Morrison turned to face the viewports. Earth hung in the darkness behind them, a blue and green jewel against the black of space. He had sworn an oath to protect that world and all its children, no matter how far from home they might be. "Set course for Corvath space," he said. "Maximum speed, we have people to rescue." The fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, vanishing from Earth orbit in a flash of brilliant light. Meanwhile, in Corvath space, the Empire was celebrating its easy victory. Admiral Vexnar had been promoted for his successful conquest of Nova Haven. The new slaves were being distributed to mining colonies throughout the Empire, put to work extracting precious resources from hostile worlds. Sarah Chen found herself on a planet called Corval 7, a barren rock with toxic air and crushing gravity. She and dozens of other colonists were forced to work in underground mines, digging out rare minerals with primitive tools. The Corvath did not care if their slaves lived or died. There were always more to replace them. But even in that dark place, Sarah kept hope alive. She organized the other prisoners, teaching them to work together, to share what little food they had, to care for the sick and wounded. She told them stories of Earth, of the brave men and women who had fought for freedom throughout human history. "They will come for us," she told them. "I know they will, we just have to survive until then." Some believed her, others had given up hope entirely, but Sarah refused to stop fighting. She had promised her children that she would get them home, and she intended to keep that promise. The Corvath guards found her determination amusing. They had seen hundreds of species broken by slavery. Humans would be no different, they thought. It was only a matter of time. What they did not know was that the human fleet was already on its way. The journey to Corvath space took 3 weeks. During that time, Morrison and his officers studied everything humanity knew about the Corvath Empire. They analyzed their technology, their tactics, their military strength. "They outnumber us significantly," said Commander Williams, the fleet's chief tactician. "Intelligence estimates put their total fleet strength at over 2,000 warships. We have 400. "And their technology?" Morrison asked. "Superior in most areas. Better shields, better weapons, better sensors. If we fight them head-on, we'll lose." Morrison studied the tactical displays. The Corvath Empire was vast, spanning hundreds of star systems. They had been conquering other species for thousands of years. On paper, they should be unbeatable. But Morrison had something the Corvath did not: centuries of human military history to draw upon. Humanity had been fighting wars since before they learned to write. They had developed strategies and tactics that had been refined through countless conflicts. "We won't fight them head-on," Morrison said. "We'll use the Hannibal strategy." The officers exchanged glances. The Hannibal strategy was named after an ancient human general who had faced a much larger enemy. He had won by attacking where they were weak, by moving faster than they expected, by using the terrain to his advantage. We hit their supply lines first, Morrison explained. We target their communication networks. We make them blind and hungry. Then we strike at their heart. The plan was risky. It required the fleet to split into smaller groups, each one operating independently deep in enemy territory. If any of those groups were caught by a larger Korvath force, they would be destroyed. But it was the only way to win. The human fleet entered Korvath space 3 weeks after leaving Earth. They came in from an unexpected direction, slipping past the Empire's border defenses while the Korvath were still celebrating their victory at Nova Haven. The first attack came at a supply depot called Station Corval 12. It was a massive facility, responsible for distributing food and fuel to dozens of Korvath worlds. 100 transport ships were docked there when the human strike force arrived. Commander Sarah Kim led the attack. Her task force was small, just 12 ships, but they hit the station with everything they had. The Korvath guards were caught completely by surprise. They had never expected anyone to strike so deep into their territory. The battle was short and brutal. The human ships darted between the dock transports, their weapons blazing. The station's defenses tried to respond, but the humans were too fast, too aggressive. Within 20 minutes, Station Corval 12 was a field of wreckage. More attacks followed. Human ships appeared without warning throughout Korvath space, striking at targets and then vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. Communication relays, fuel depots, shipyards, all of them came under attack. The Korvath High Command was thrown into confusion. They had thousands of ships, but they could not be everywhere at once. Every time they sent a fleet to hunt down the human raiders, the raiders had already moved on to a new target. Admiral Vexnar was recalled from his comfortable new posting to deal with the crisis. He stood before the Korvath Supreme Council, trying to explain how a species they had dismissed as primitive was causing so much damage. "They fight like no enemy we have ever faced," he said. "They do not seek direct battle. They strike and withdraw, strike and withdraw. We cannot predict where they will appear next." "Then find them and destroy them," the council demanded. "You said these humans were weak. You said they would not resist." Vexnar had no answer. He had underestimated the humans, and now his entire career was at risk. He ordered his fleet to search for the human raiders, determined to crush them once and for all. But while the Korvath hunted for the human strike forces, Admiral Morrison was leading the main fleet toward a different target entirely. The Korvath homeworld. It was a bold move, perhaps even a reckless one. The homeworld was defended by hundreds of ships and massive orbital fortresses. A direct assault would be suicide. But Morrison had no intention of attacking directly. "We're going to send a message," he told his officers, "one they'll never forget." The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel just outside the Korvath home system. For a moment, they hung in space, visible to every sensor on every Korvath ship and station. Then Morrison opened a communication channel. "This is Admiral James Morrison of the United Earth Navy. We are here to discuss the release of our citizens and reparations for the attack on Nova Haven. You have 24 hours to respond. If you refuse, we will demonstrate what humanity is capable of when provoked." The message was received with shock and disbelief. No enemy had ever reached the Korvath homeworld. No species had ever dared to threaten the heart of the Empire. The Supreme Council's response was immediate: destroy them. Every available ship in the home system moved to engage the human fleet. Over 500 warships, supported by orbital defense platforms and ground-based weapons. It was the largest defensive force in Korvath history. Morrison watched them come. His fleet was outnumbered more than 1-to-1. The Korvath had better technology, better weapons, better shields. But they did not have better soldiers. "All ships execute Battle Plan Alpha," Morrison ordered. "Show them what we're made of." The battle began. The space around the Korvath homeworld erupted in fire and light as the two fleets clashed. Energy beams crisscrossed the darkness, missiles streaked toward their targets, and ships maneuvered in the deadly dance of space combat. The Korvath commanders were confident. They outnumbered the humans significantly, and their technology was superior. They expected the battle to be over quickly. They were wrong. Human ships fought with a fury the Korvath had never seen before. They used tactics that seemed almost suicidal, driving directly into the teeth of enemy fire to deliver devastating close-range attacks. They coordinated with a precision that the Korvath could not match, multiple ships working together as if they shared a single mind. The UES Defiance led the charge. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge, calm and focused despite the chaos around him. His ship shuddered under enemy fire, but the shields held. The damage control teams worked miracles, repairing critical systems even as new damage accumulated. "Target the enemy flagship," Morrison ordered. "All weapons concentrate fire." The Defiance's main batteries opened up, sending beams of concentrated energy toward the Korvath command ship. The enemy vessel's shields flared bright under the assault, then began to fail. But the Korvath were not helpless. Their own weapons were tearing into the human fleet. Ship after ship reported critical damage. The cruiser Houston exploded, taking 300 crew members with it. The destroyer Courage was cut in half by enemy fire. The carrier Endurance lost its main hangar deck and had to withdraw from the battle. Morrison watched the casualty reports scroll across his display. Each name was a life lost, a family destroyed, but he could not afford to mourn. Not yet. The battle was far from over. "Admiral," called Captain Chen, "we're taking heavy losses. If we continue at this rate, we'll lose half the fleet within the hour." Morrison nodded. It was time for the second phase of the plan. "Signal all ships. Execute Maneuver Omega." The human fleet suddenly changed formation. Instead of fighting as individual ships, they began to cluster together in tight groups. The Korvath commanders saw this as a sign of desperation. They pressed their attack, eager to finish off the humans. That was exactly what Morrison wanted. As the Korvath ships closed in, the human formation suddenly broke apart. Ships scattered in all directions, creating confusion in the enemy ranks. And in that moment of chaos, the human ships struck. They had been holding back their most powerful weapons, saving them for this moment. Now they unleashed everything they had. Nuclear missiles, antimatter warheads, and experimental plasma weapons tore through the Korvath formation. Ships that had been attacking confidently just moments before were suddenly fighting for their lives. The Korvath flagship took a direct hit from a nuclear missile. Its shields, already weakened from the earlier bombardment, collapsed entirely. A second later, a plasma beam punched through its hull, detonating its main reactor. The explosion was visible from the planet's surface. With their flagship destroyed, the Korvath fleet fell into disarray. Ships began to retreat, abandoning their formation in a desperate attempt to escape. The human fleet pursued, picking off stragglers and driving the survivors back toward the planet's defensive platforms. But Morrison did not want to destroy the Korvath entirely. He wanted them to understand that they had lost. He wanted them to surrender. "Open a channel to the planet," he ordered. His image appeared on every screen on the Korvath homeworld. Millions of Korvath citizens saw the human admiral standing on his bridge, surrounded by the wreckage of their fleet. "Your navy has been defeated," Morrison said. "Your supreme fleet has been scattered. We could destroy your planet if we wished, but we are not here for conquest. We are here for our people. Release all human prisoners immediately and agree to pay reparations for the attack on Nova Haven. Do this, and we will leave in peace. Refuse, and we will demonstrate what happens when humanity is pushed too far." The Korvath Supreme Council was in chaos. Half their fleet was destroyed or fleeing. The humans had done what no enemy had ever accomplished. They had brought war to the heart of the Empire. Some council members called for continued resistance. Others, seeing the burning wreckage of their ships, argued for negotiation. The debate raged for hours while the human fleet waited in orbit, silent and threatening. Finally, the council reached a decision. They had no choice. The humans had proven themselves to be far more dangerous than anyone had expected. Continued resistance would only lead to more destruction. "We accept your terms," the council announced. "All human prisoners will be released. Reparations will be paid." On Corval 7, the news arrived like a thunderbolt. Sarah Chen was working in the mines when the Corvath guards suddenly stopped supervising. They stood motionless, listening to their communicators with expressions of shock and disbelief. "The war is over," one of them finally said. "You are being released." Sarah did not believe it at first. She had been a slave for months. She had seen terrible things, suffered terrible hardships. The idea that freedom was suddenly possible seemed too good to be true. But then she saw the human ships descending through the toxic atmosphere. They were rescue shuttles, painted with the emblem of the United Earth Navy. They were coming for her. She fell to her knees and wept. The rescue operation took weeks. Thousands of human prisoners were scattered across dozens of Corvath worlds. Each one had to be located, transported to waiting ships, and given medical care. Many were in bad condition, weakened by hard labor and poor treatment. Admiral Morrison personally oversaw the operation. He visited the prison camps, shaking hands with the survivors, promising them that they would be going home. He saw the conditions they had endured, and his determination to hold the Corvath accountable only grew stronger. Sarah and her children were among the first to be rescued. A medical team examined them on the shuttle, treating their injuries and malnutrition. Sarah watched through the viewport as the barren landscape of Corval 7 fell away below them. She was going home. The fleet gathered at a rendezvous point outside Corvath space. Hundreds of ships, many of them damaged from the battle, formed up around the transports carrying the freed prisoners. It was time to leave. But before they departed, Morrison had one final task to complete. He ordered the fleet to form up in a line facing the Corvath border. Every ship, from the massive battleships to the smallest shuttles, took its place in the formation. Then, as one, they activated their weapons systems, painting the space ahead with targeting lasers and sensor beams. It was a show of force, a reminder to the Corvath of what they had faced. The message was clear: do not test us again. Then the fleet turned and headed for home. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. During that time, Sarah got to know the other survivors. They shared their stories, mourned their losses, and slowly began to heal. The children, resilient as children always are, started to play again, their laughter echoing through the ship's corridors. Morrison made a point of visiting the civilian quarters every day. He sat with the survivors, listened to their experiences, and assured them that they would be taken care of. He learned their names, remembered their faces, and carried their stories in his heart. One day Sarah approached him. "Admiral," she said, "I want to thank you for coming for us, for not forgetting about us." Morrison smiled, but there was sadness in his eyes. "We lost a lot of good people in this war," he said. "Ships, crews, friends. The price of your freedom was paid in blood." "I know," Sarah said, "and I'm sorry for that, but you gave us hope when we had none. You showed the galaxy that humanity protects its own." Morrison nodded. "That's what we do," he said. "That's who we are." When the fleet finally reached Earth, they found a world waiting to welcome them. Millions of people had gathered at viewing stations around the planet, watching as the ships came home. Cheers erupted as the damaged vessels limped into orbit, each one a testament to the courage and sacrifice of its crew. The survivors were transported to the surface in ceremonial shuttles. Crowds lined the streets, throwing flowers and waving flags. Sarah held her children's hands as they walked through the throng, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and support. President Rodriguez met them at the landing site. She embraced Sarah, tears streaming down her face. "Welcome home," she said. "Welcome home." In the months that followed, humanity rebuilt and recovered. Nova Haven was reconstructed, its people returning to start again. New colonies were established, protected by orbital defenses and patrol fleets that would never again leave civilian settlements unguarded. The Korvath Empire paid their reparations in full. They had no choice. The defeat at their homeworld had shattered their reputation as an unbeatable power. Other species they had conquered began to stir, sensing weakness. The empire that had seemed eternal was showing cracks. Admiral Morrison retired from active service. He had done his duty and now he wanted to rest. He returned to his hometown on Earth, a small coastal village where the sea met the sky. He spent his days fishing and watching the sunset, finally at peace. Sarah Chen returned to Nova Haven with her children. She helped rebuild the colony, working alongside hundreds of other survivors. The new town rose from the ashes of the old, stronger and more beautiful than before. A memorial was built in the central square, listing the names of everyone who had died in the attack. She visited it every day. Emma grew up to become a pilot in the Earth Navy. She patrolled the borders of human space, protecting colonies from threats both known and unknown. She never forgot what the Korvath had done to her family, but she channeled her anger into purpose, into duty. Her brother became a doctor, dedicating his life to healing others. He worked in the colony hospital, treating farmers and miners and their children. He was known for his kindness, his patience, and his absolute refusal to give up on any patient. The war changed humanity. Before Nova Haven, they had seen themselves as explorers and settlers, peaceful people who wanted only to learn and grow. After Nova Haven, they understood that peace had to be protected, that strength was sometimes necessary to preserve what they loved. The United Earth Navy expanded rapidly. New ships were built, new weapons developed, new tactics refined. Humanity would never again be caught unprepared. The galaxy had noticed what they were capable of, and other species began to treat them with newfound respect. Some feared that this new military focus would change humanity for the worse, that they would become conquerors like the Korvath. But that fear proved unfounded. Humans remained who they had always been, curious, adaptable, and fundamentally decent. They used their strength to defend the weak, to free the oppressed, to bring justice to those who had none. The Korvath Empire eventually collapsed, torn apart by rebellion and internal conflict. The species they had enslaved rose up, inspired in part by humanity's example. Within a century, the empire was nothing but a memory, a cautionary tale told to children about the dangers of cruelty and arrogance. Humanity continued to spread across the stars. They built hundreds of colonies, made contact with dozens of species, and helped establish a galactic community based on cooperation rather than conquest. They became known as fierce protectors and loyal friends, dangerous enemies and forgiving victors. And everywhere they went, they carried the lesson of Nova Haven with them. Sarah lived to be very old. She saw her grandchildren grow up on the world she had helped rebuild. She watched humanity rise to become one of the most respected species in the galaxy. And she never forgot the dark days when hope seemed lost, when the future seemed to belong to those who would enslave and destroy. On her last night, surrounded by her family, she looked up at the stars one final time. "We made it," she whispered. "We survived, and we became something wonderful." She closed her eyes and smiled. The story of Nova Haven became legend, told and retold across countless worlds. It was the story of how a peaceful colony was attacked by a powerful empire, and how humanity responded with a fury that changed the galaxy forever. But it was also a story of hope, of ordinary people who refused to give up, even in the darkest times, of a species that valued every single life, that would cross the galaxy to rescue its children, of the unbreakable bond between humans, no matter how far apart they might be. The galaxy learned many things from Nova Haven. They learned that humans were dangerous when provoked. They learned that human technology, while not always the most advanced, was used with creativity and skill. They learned that human soldiers fought with a determination that bordered on madness. But most importantly, they learned this: you do not attack an Earth colony. Not because humans are vengeful, not because they are cruel, but because they love each other with a fierce and terrible love, a love that will not accept the loss of even one innocent life. They will come for their people. They will fight against any odds, and they will not stop until their family is safe. That is the lesson of Nova Haven. That is the truth that the Korvath learned too late. Humanity is not a species to be trifled with. And if you hurt one of them, you answer to all of them.